It's my privilege to introduce Professor, Senior Professor Dr. Sanjay Deshmukh, PhD, DSc, HC, LLC, DSc, HC, LLM, Adjunct Professor, Institute of Chemical Technology, ICT, Dean to be University, Matunga, Mumbai, Vice Chancellor in the tenure 2016, University of Mumbai. It is a rare privilege to present a scholar whose life refuses to be limited by discipline, title, or location. What stands before us today is not just a distinguished academic, but a teacher in the most profound sense, someone who has constantly asked not how education can promote career, but how it can enhance human potential. Trained as a life scientist and equally influenced by law, public policy, ethical inquiry, he moves seamlessly between the research, governance, grassroots engagement. His scholarship covering ecology, biodiversity, climate change, institutional reform, and human well-being has resulted in over 225 publications, drawing on the field experience from 57 countries. His impact extends beyond academia. He has led civil society organizations, worked with communities, and contributed to higher education reforms that promote transparency, inclusion, and purpose. As the Vice Chancellor of one of the world's most prominent universities of University of Mumbai, he combined deep intellect and moral courage in his leadership qualities that earned him two honorary doctoral degrees for services to society and education. What you will hear today is not an address driven by ambition, but by responsibility. We present to you Senior Professor Dr. Sanjay Deshmukh, the youngest ever full-time Vice Chancellor of the University of Mumbai and an academic thorough leader. Thank you very much.
नमस्कार आणि सुप्रभात. आजच्या या अतिशय मंगलदिनी व्यासपीठावर उपस्थित असलेले श्रद्धेय प्रोफेसर ज्येष्ठराज जोशी सर, त्यांच्या सुविद्य पत्नी सौभाग्यवती जोशी ठाकूर, आपले एमजीएम विश्वविद्यालयाचे कुलगुरू आणि माझे जुने स्नेही मंडळाने माझ्यामध्ये सिनियर आहेत, परंतु त्यांच्यामुळे मी आज इथे आहे. जवळजवळ महिन्याभरापूर्वी त्यांनी मला फोन करून सांगितले की मला यायचं, असे आपले प्रोफेसर सत्कार सर, महाराष्ट्र तत्व विज्ञान परिषद याचे अध्यक्ष, त्याचबरोबर आजच्या या कार्यक्रमाला आता ज्यांचा आपण मी निरूपणच म्हणेन की ज्याच्यातून आपण सर्व धन्य झालो असे प्रोफेसर अभ्यंकर सर, मोहनराव देशमुख सर, शेळके मॅडम, मुंबई विद्यापीठातील सहकारी, देशाच्या कानाकोपऱ्यातनं इथे उपस्थित असलेले सर्व आपण तत्वज्ञानाचे आणि विज्ञानाचे सहकारी, महाराष्ट्रामध्ये खऱ्या अर्थाने आपण ज्याला एज्युकेशनल रिफॉर्म म्हणतो त्याची नीव, त्याचं बीज ज्या प्रमुख 2-3 व्यक्तींनी रोवलं असे आपल्या महात्मा गांधी मिशनचे प्रणेते आदरणीय अंकुशरावजी, ज्या काळी महाराष्ट्रात काहीतरी केलं पाहिजे, शिक्षण क्षेत्रात काहीतरी करायला हवं अशी भावना असणारे कमी लोक होते, आणि त्यावेळेला महाराष्ट्राला एक द्रष्टा मुख्यमंत्री मिळाला वसंतदादा पाटलांच्या रूपाने आणि द्रष्टे कार्यकर्ते मिळाले अंकुशरावांच्या रूपाने आणि त्यांचे बंधू कमल किशोर. या सर्वांनी मिळून वसंतदादांच्या एका द्रष्ट्या निर्णयानुसार महाराष्ट्रामध्ये प्रथमच शिक्षणाचं खाजगीकरण झालं आणि त्यानंतर आजपर्यंत हा प्रवास महाराष्ट्राच्या दृष्टीने अतिशय करणार आहे. आणि त्याच्यामुळे अशा या वास्तूमध्ये ज्याला महात्मा गांधींचं नाव आहे, जी प्रेरणा आहे, ज्यांनी राष्ट्राला आणि जगाला प्रेरणा दिली, अशा या विद्यापीठाच्या प्रांगणात उभं राहून आपल्याबरोबर हितगुज करताना मला मनस्वी आनंद होतोय आणि मी स्वतःला भाग्यवान समजतो. माझ्या कारकिर्दीचा उल्लेख करताना मी एक बायोलॉजिस्ट आहे याची मला पूर्ण जाणीव आहे आणि जरी मला या ठिकाणी अशा प्रकारे सन्मान देऊन आपल्याशी बोलण्यासाठी आमंत्रित करण्यात आलेलं आहे, तर मला माझ्या मर्यादाही पूर्णपणे माहिती आहेत. तथापि अतिशय अभ्यासपूर्ण असं एक लिखाण मी या निमित्ताने करू शकलो आणि जे मी लिखित स्वरूपामध्ये याची प्रतही माझ्या बरोबर आणलेली आहे, ती मी आपल्या व्यासपीठावरील माझ्या वरिष्ठ सहकाऱ्यांना देईन. पण त्याच्यातून एक मी प्रयत्न केला आहे की कशा पद्धतीने आपण विज्ञान, तंत्रज्ञान, तत्वज्ञान याची सांगड घालून आपली पाळंमुळं ज्या या भारत मातेच्या शेकडो हजारो वर्षांच्या इतिहासाने आपल्याला दिली की याची घट्ट झाल्यामुळे आपण आजपर्यंत पोहोचलो, त्याचं लोकन करणं खूप महत्वाचं आहे असं मला वाटतं. आणि म्हणून या निमित्ताने जे लिखाण मी करू शकलो सुमारे 70 पानी मी लिहिली. तथापि एक 20-25-30 मिनिटांमध्ये हा विषय मांडणं या दृष्टीने मी काही गोष्टी एक 8-9 स्लाइड्सच्या रूपाने आपल्या विवेचनासाठी लिहून आणलंय आणि त्याच्याशी सुसंगत असं एक लिखाण जे मी संक्षिप्त स्वरूपात केलेलं आहे त्याचं वाचन मी त्याच्याबरोबर करेन जेणेकरून मला वेळेमध्ये माझा विषय मांडता येऊ शकेल. आपल्या परवानगीने मी इंग्रजीत बोलणार आहे. मला असं वाटतं की या भाषेमध्ये जगामध्ये आपल्याला सर्व ठिकाणी जाऊन आपले विचार मांडता यावेत. जे विचार स्वामी विवेकानंदांनी सुद्धा इंग्रजीत मांडले, मला असं वाटतं की या भाषेचं महत्व आपल्याला नक्कीच लक्षात घेणं आवश्यक आहे. तथापि आपल्या या कॉन्फरन्सच्या निमित्ताने जो मराठवाडा हैदराबाद संस्थानचा भाग होता, तर त्याची एक आठवण थोडक्यात सांगेन की जिथे निजामाच्या राज्यामध्ये शाळेपासून अंडर ग्रॅज्युएट पर्यंतचं सर्व शिक्षण केवळ उर्दूतून घेणं आवश्यक आहे. माझे वडील शाळेपासून बीकॉम पर्यंत केवळ उर्दूमध्ये शिकले. साहीच्या साही पेपर कॉमर्सचे 100 मार्क ते उर्दूतून दिले आणि आज आपण ADP 2020 मध्ये त्याचा पुन्हा मागोवा घेतो आहोत. तर काही लोक आपल्याकडे असणारे शेवटी ते भारतीयच होते आणि ते द्रष्टेही होते. माझ्या वडिलांना LLB करायचं होतं तर बीकॉमच्या नंतर ABCD शिकावं लागलं, कारण LLB हा विषय फक्त पोस्ट ग्रॅज्युएशन लेवलला इंग्रजीतून घेता येतो. तर अशा पद्धतीने इंग्रजी आणि आपली मातृभाषा याची सांगड घालून आपण आपल्या परंपरांचा विचार करून त्याची जाणीव ठेवली तर मला असं वाटतं की भारताला ज्या पद्धतीने आपण 2047 साली विकसित भारताचं स्वप्न पाहतो आहोत ते खऱ्या अर्थाने साकार व्हायला खूप मदत होऊ शकेल. माझ्या या प्रेझेंटेशन मध्ये मी 7 मुद्द्यांवरती बोलणार आहे आणि ते 7 मुद्दे दिलेले आहेत. The age of acceleration and crisis of meaning, Vigyan, the splendor and limits of science, Vivek, the awakening of discerning wisdom, Indian knowledge systems, a civilizational grammar, NEP 2020, education versus ethical architecture, science, society and ethical destiny, आणि the eternal pulse, bridging outer mastery and inner balance. अशा पद्धतीने मी लिखाण केलेलं आहे आणि जे तुम्हाला PDF च्या रूपामध्ये असतात आपले कुलगुरू महोदय नंतर आपल्या वेबसाईटवरती त्याचं तुम्हाला ऍक्सेस करता येईलच. पण या निमित्ताने मला असं वाटतं या 8-9 स्लाईड्समध्ये मी एक थोडासा मागोवा घेणार आहे ज्याबद्दल मला आपल्याशी बोलायचं आहे. आणि आपल्या परवानगीने मी त्यातलं काही भागाचं वाचनही करेन जेणेकरून मला वेळेमध्ये हा विषय मांडता येऊ शकेल. Respected participants, we have to not only look at the conference as a launching pad for our networking as well as learning, but we'll have to also pause intentionally, mindfully in the fast moving flow of our times. History does not always signal its turning points loudly. Often they show themselves quietly. Through a growing discomfort, a feeling that something vital is being left behind by speed, success, and scale. This address invites us to undertake a journey from Vijnan, the splendor of analytical and scientific knowledge, to Vivek, the maturity of discerning wisdom, from outer mystery to inner balance. The age of acceleration and the crisis of meaning, about which I would like to just brief. The knowledge today multiplies at an unprecedented velocity in human history. Information flows non-stop across screens, institutions, disciplines, and borders, reducing distances that once required years of apprenticeship, patience, and inner growth. Humanity has never been so informed and yet never so uncertain of meaning. For abundance, however, is not direction. Knowledge reveals what can be done, but it remains silent on what ought to be done. When knowledge expands without a moral or philosophical compass, it becomes unanchored. It floats freely, powerful, mobile, efficient, and disturbingly indifferent to consequences. Orientation cannot be extracted from data. It must be cultivated through values, reflection, and ethical imagination. Without these, knowledge becomes force without a destination, movement without the meaning. Modern knowledge advances through specification as well as specialization. Precision increases, but coherence weakens. Disciplines speak to private languages, silos replace conversation. This fragmentation does not stay within the institution, it spreads inward. Individuals become divided, technically skilled but ethically uncertain, professionally successful but existentially unanchored. The crisis of meaning is both external and internal. To fix it, education must restore integration between disciplines, between knowledge and values, and ultimately between thought and being self. The second point is regarding Vijnan, the splendor and limits of science. Science was born not from ambition, but from wonder. Its earliest instinct was awe at the unknown, a patient attentiveness to nature's rhythms, and a willingness to listen before trying to control. Over time, however, understanding gradually shifted into control. Control matured into optimization, and that revolved around dominance. This path, it must be acknowledged, is not inherently wrong. Control has cured diseases, extended lives, increased agricultural yield, and alleviated suffering on an unprecedented scale. Humanity owes much of its material progress to this tragedy. However, the danger arises when control becomes the only goal of scientific ambition. A science that forgets wonder risks losing relevance and reverence of life. For complexity or unintended consequences. Without reverence, power becomes arrogance and capability becomes disconnected from care. When means overtake ends, perhaps the greatest danger of modern science arises when means surpass ends. Humanity increasingly learns how to do things before questioning whether they should. When means dominate ends, humanity gains unprecedented power but loses direction. Progress accelerates without a clear distinction and destination. In such moments, science does not require less rigor but greater wisdom, a guiding intelligence capable of placing power within purpose, innovation with ethics, and mastery within responsibility. Only then can science remain a force not merely of advancement but of genuine human flourishing. The next point, I have only 7 points. The third one is Vivek, awakening, discerning wisdom. Intelligence is one of humanity's most celebrated gifts. It solves problems, improves methods, optimizes systems, and increases efficiency. Intelligence builds bridges, decodes genomes, speeds up computation, and manages complexity with remarkable accuracy. However, intelligence alone does not determine direction. It answers the question of how, but remains silent on the question of why. Wisdom begins where intelligence ends. Wisdom determines which problems are worth solving, which paths to avoid, and which ambitions require restraint. Intelligence improves systems, wisdom considers their consequences. Vivek is that inner faculty that stands between impulse and action. It is discernment, the ability to perceive wholes rather than fragments, to anticipate outcomes beyond immediate gain, and to balance competing goods without absolutism. Vivek does not negate intelligence, it governs it. And without Vivek, power accelerates unchecked and humanity risks being overwhelmed by its own ingenuity. When we talk about consciousness as the missing variable, I think we have to look at the modern discourse which endlessly discusses systems, structures, strategies, and outputs. Rarely does it mention the knower, yet every system is created by mind, every technology embodies intention, every institution reflects the state of consciousness that shaped it. And consciousness is not secondary to knowledge, it is fundamental. To educate without attending to consciousness is to develop capability without character and competence without conscience. Proper education, therefore, must address not only what students know, but also how they think, attend to, and choose. It must cultivate depth of awareness alongside a broad range of information. Silence is without withdrawal from life, but it is not withdrawal from life. It is integration with it. It enables scattered thoughts to cohere, competing impulses to settle, and deeper values to surface. A silent mind is not empty, it is attentive. It sees more clearly, chooses more wisely, and acts responsibly. In cultivating science, education restores balance between speed and depth, between power and wisdom, and between knowing and becoming. When we talk about Indian knowledge systems, this is my fourth point, the civilizational viewpoint of India, knowledge was never just about accumulating information or mastering techniques. To know was to transform. Knowledge changed the knower. It reshaped perception, behavior, and inner orientation. The pursuit of learning was closely linked to the character of development. The knower was not separate from the act of knowing. Consciousness itself was part of epistemic process. The concept of Indian knowledge system provides a profound correction to modern educational paradigms that often emphasize skill without sensitivity, competence without conscience. It reminds us that knowledge is truly complete only when it enhances humanity and not just ability. When we talk about dharma in its civilizational framework, it was not about moral policing or rigid rule following. It was about balance. It acknowledged that each action sends ripples across interconnected realms: the self, society, nature, and time. Ethics, therefore, were ecological rather than punitive, relational rather than authoritarian. Dharma served as an ethical compass, guiding power, ambition, and innovation towards sustainability and restraint. In an era struggling with climate instability,